They called him the Butcher of Plainfield, a quiet man from a small Wisconsin town who seemed harmless, almost invisible. But behind the walls of his farmhouse, Ed Gein was crafting horrors beyond imagination, a collection of nightmares stitched together from human remains. This is not just a story about murder. It's a story about obsession, loneliness, and the disturbing ways a human mind can twist under pressure. The story of Ed Gein is not one of fiction, but one that inspired it. From Psycho to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre to the Silence of the Lambs, his shadow lingers behind every scream. Today we look into the life, the crimes, and the legacy of the man who became the blueprint for horror itself. Ed Gein was born on August 27, 1906, in La Crosse, Wisconsin. He was the son of George and Augusta Gein, a mismatched pair bound by fear and control. George was an alcoholic who could never hold a job. Augusta, on the other hand, was deeply religious, fanatically so. She preached fire and brimstone to her two sons, Henry and Ed, condemning the world as evil and women as the root of all sin. To her, the outside world was corrupt, and salvation could only be found through strict obedience to her word. Every day, young Ed listened to her sermons, her voice echoing through the small farmhouse. The world is full of sin, and women are the instruments of the devil. Augusta's influence wasn't just spiritual, it was psychological domination. She isolated her sons from others, forbidding them from making friends, especially with women. And Ed obeyed. He adored his mother. He feared her. She was his entire world, the light and the darkness in his small, rural life. But that world began to collapse in 1945 when Augusta suffered a series of strokes. When she died, Ed Gein was left utterly alone. Her death shattered him. The one person who told him how to live and what to fear was gone. And in her absence, Ed's mind began to unravel.
After his mother's death, Ed withdrew from the town of Plainfield. He boarded up the rooms his mother once used, leaving them untouched, a shrine to her memory. He lived in a small, cluttered part of the house. No heat, no running water, just silence and decay. But inside that silence, something dark began to grow. Ed started visiting local graveyards at night. He claimed later that he entered trances, as if someone else was guiding him. He would dig up the freshly buried bodies of middle-aged women who reminded him of Augusta. He brought them home, and there, in the solitude of his farmhouse, he began experimenting, reading anatomy books, cutting, preserving, and crafting grotesque trophies from the dead. When investigators would later enter that home, they described it as a house of horrors. They found chairs upholstered in human skin, skulls turned into bowls, a lampshade made of faces, masks carved from the flesh of the dead, hanging on the walls like a gallery of nightmares. Among the most disturbing discoveries, a full woman suit made from human skin. Ed admitted that he would wear it to become his mother, to feel closer to her. He wasn't just collecting bodies. He was trying to resurrect the only person he ever loved. For years, Plainfield's townspeople thought of Ed as a harmless oddball. He did odd jobs around town, babysat for neighbors' kids, even helped with farm work. He smiled, spoke softly, and kept to himself. But in 1957, everything changed. On November 16th, hardware store owner Bernice Warden disappeared. Her son, Frank Warden, told police that Ed Gein had been in the store the night before. When officers arrived at Gein's farmhouse, they didn't know what to expect. What they found inside would scar them for life. Bernice Warden's decapitated body hung upside down in a shed, gutted like a deer. Inside the house, police found skulls on the bedposts, boxes of bones, human organs in jars, and the now infamous skin suit. The newspapers would call it the House of Horrors. Psychologists called it the ultimate descent into madness. And America had never seen anything like it before. Ed Gein confessed without much resistance. He admitted to murdering Bernice Warden and another woman, Mary Hogan. But he also admitted to countless grave robberies, though the exact number was never confirmed. After his arrest, Ed was declared mentally incompetent to stand trial. Doctors diagnosed him with schizophrenia and psychosis. He claimed he heard voices, sometimes his mother's, commanding him to do unspeakable things. But psychologists saw something more complex. A man who never escaped his mother's control, even after her death. His crimes weren't just acts of violence. They were acts of devotion. Each body he exhumed, each piece of skin he stitched, was an attempt to bring her back. In one interview, Ed calmly explained, "I wanted to keep her near me. I wanted to make a woman suit so I could become her." He saw himself as both mother and son, victim and killer, trapped in a world of his own creation. Forensic psychiatrists later described Gein as a textbook case of an Oedipal fixation. Unable to move past the bond with his mother, his desires twisted into a form of self-recreation. He didn't want to destroy women, he wanted to be one, specifically her. And in that obsession, his mind fractured beyond repair. In 1968, more than a decade after his arrest, Ed Gein was finally deemed fit to stand trial. He was found guilty of murder, but legally insane. He was committed to Central State Hospital for the criminally insane, where he spent the rest of his life. Fellow patients described him as quiet, polite, almost gentle, a man who never fully grasped the weight of what he had done. He spent his days reading, painting, and helping around the hospital. When asked about his crimes, he often smiled awkwardly and said, "They were just things I had to do." Ed Gein died in 1984 of respiratory failure at the age of 77. He was buried next to his mother in Plainfield Cemetery, the very place where so many of his crimes had begun. But Ed Gein's death did not end his story. If anything, it made him immortal, not as a man, but as a symbol of pure psychological horror. Filmmakers and writers were fascinated by him. In 1960, Alfred Hitchcock released Psycho, inspired by Gein's obsession with his mother. Norman Bates, the polite, boyish motel owner who couldn't let go of his mother, was a mirror of Ed's own fractured identity. In 1974, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre introduced Leatherface, a killer who wore masks made of human skin. Then came The Silence of the Lambs and the character of Buffalo Bill, another man who wanted to transform himself through the skin of others. Ed Gein's crimes didn't just shock the world, they redefined horror. They reminded audiences that true terror doesn't come from monsters or demons, but from the darkness that can live within an ordinary man. Today, Ed Gein's story still provokes the same haunting question. Was he born evil, or was he made that way? His life shows us how isolation, abuse, and fanaticism can erode the boundaries of sanity. He was not a mad genius or a diabolical mastermind. He was a broken man shaped by fear, control, and loneliness. In many ways, Ed Gein represents the ultimate human horror, the idea that under certain circumstances, even the most unassuming person can become something unimaginable. And while his crimes are long past, his influence lingers in film, in literature, and in the collective nightmares of our culture. Because the scariest thing about Ed Gein is not what he did, it's how ordinary he seemed before he did it. The story of Ed Gein is not one we tell for entertainment. It's one we tell to understand the boundaries of the human mind. He was a murderer, a grave robber, a man lost between love and madness. But above all, he was a reminder that horror is not born in the dark. It's made there, one thought, one trauma, one obsession at a time. So next time you watch a horror film and feel the chill crawl up your spine, remember, behind the fiction, there was a man named Ed Gein.